Imagine waking up to find that your parents had a price for you. Not a ransom, not a rescue, a sale price. Written down in ink, signed before witnesses, and sealed before you even opened your eyes that morning. Kira's parents didn't sell her out of desperation alone. They sold her out of convenience. The debt was theirs. The bankruptcy was theirs. The creditors knocking at midnight, all theirs. But Kira, young, quiet, still stupid enough to believe that blood meant something, was the only asset they hadn't already spent. They called it a contract, a business arrangement between packs. They didn't call it what it was. They thought she would disappear quietly into Iron Claw territory, swallowed by the dark, never spoken of again. They thought wrong, because they didn't know what slept inside her blood. And they certainly didn't know that the man powerful enough to shatter an entire pack with one command was already moving through the night, already searching, already hers. This is the story of how a daughter became a slave, and how a slave became a queen. The study smelled the way her childhood always had: aged leather, expensive scotch, and something rotting underneath that no amount of money could ever quite cover. Kira had been in the kitchen when she heard the voices, measured, the kind her father used when he was closing a deal and didn't want witnesses. She wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron. She'd been making bread again, the only thing left in this house she could still do without being told she was doing it wrong, and pushed open the heavy oak door. Her mother, Elena, was smiling. That was the first wrong thing. Elena hadn't smiled in this room since the bankruptcy notices started arriving. Hadn't smiled since the creditors began calling it hours no decent person calls. She'd spent 6 months wearing the same gray expression, moving through the halls of this decaying mansion like a woman already grieving something she hadn't told anyone about yet. But she was smiling now, both hands wrapped around a velvet coin purse, holding it the way you hold something earned, something deserved. Silas stood beside her, a rolled scroll in his grip, heavy parchment, cream-colored, sealed in deep crimson wax, a claw mark pressed into it like a wound that refused to close. A man Kira didn't recognize stood near the doorway, tall, a scar running diagonal across his jaw, like an old argument he'd won. He wore a cloak so dark red it looked black where the shadows touched it. He wasn't looking at her parents. He was looking at her, the way a man looks at something he's come to collect. Dad. Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. What is this? Silas turned. And for just a moment, one single moment, something crossed his face. She would spend years trying to name it. It wasn't guilt. Not exactly. It was the expression of a man who had already decided, and was now only waiting for someone else to carry the weight of it. We found a solution, he said, for the debt. He placed the scroll on the desk between them. The iron claw seal stared up at her like an open eye. You leave tonight. Her hands were still dusty with flour. That was the detail she would never forget. Not the scroll on the desk, not the scarred man by the door, not even her mother's smile. That wrong, terrible smile. What she would remember years later, when she was trying to make sense of the night her life ended and another one began, was the flour, still on her hands, because she had been making bread, and because she had believed 2 minutes ago that tomorrow was going to come the way it always came, gray and ordinary, and hers. She looked at the scroll. It looked back. "Pick it up," Silas said. Not gently, the way he said things when the decision had already been made and the conversation was purely procedural. "Read it." Kira didn't move. "Who is that man?" The scarred man by the door said nothing. He wasn't there to answer questions. She understood that now. He was there the way a receipt is there. Proof that something had already changed hands. "He's a courier," Elena said, voice smooth and unbothered, already pivoting to the logistics. "From the Ironclaw territory. He'll escort you at nightfall." Escort. The word sat in the room like something dead. Kira crossed to the desk slowly. She didn't want to touch the scroll. Well, there was something about its weight, even before she picked it up, that felt final. Like signing your name to something you couldn't take back. She picked it up anyway, because she needed to see the words herself. She needed the words to be wrong. They weren't wrong. The parchment was thick and deliberate, the kind of document that had been written by someone who did this regularly. The language at the top was formal, almost gentle. Transfer of ward, voluntary relinquishment of custodial responsibility. Soft words built around a hard thing. She read past them, past the clauses about terms of service and labor obligation, past the paragraph about housing and feeding, which was not generosity, she realized, but a legal protection for them, a guarantee that the asset would remain functional. Her name was in the middle of the page, Zahira Wren Aldrich, female, age 22, no PAC affiliation on record. Below that, in smaller text, delivered in full settlement of the outstanding debt owed by Silas Aldrich and Elena Aldrich to the Iron Claw PAC in the amount of 42,000 marks. She read it twice, then a third time, because her brain kept trying to rewrite it into something that made sense. 42,000 marks, she said. It cleared the debt, Silas said, like that was an answer. I'm not. She stopped, started again. Her voice was very quiet. She needed it to stay quiet, or she was going to lose something she couldn't afford to lose right now. Dad, I'm your daughter. You're 22 years old, Elena said, adjusting the rings on her fingers. And you don't have a PAC. You don't have a bond. And you don't contribute. I make your food. The words came out before she could stop them. Small and furious and humiliating in their smallness. I fix the pipes when they freeze. Kira. Silas said her name like a full stop. The Iron Claw PAC is not a prison. You'll have structure, shelter, purpose. He said the word purpose the way people say it when they mean labor and don't want to. This is the best outcome available given our situation. Our situation. She looked at her mother, because some ancient, irrational part of her still believed that somewhere beneath the silk robe and the careful expression and the coin purse already in her hands, Elena might flinch. Might feel something shift in the room. Might say, wait, not this. Not her. Elena met her eyes and smiled, just slightly, and the way she smiled when a headache finally passed. Kira put the scroll back on the desk, very carefully. Her hands were shaking, and she didn't want them to know that, didn't want to give them the image of her falling apart in this room. She looked at the Iron Claw seal, that crimson claw pressed deep into the wax, the edges ragged like it had been stamped in anger. And she thought about the stories. The ones that circulated in whispered fragments at the market, at the edges of PAC gatherings she was never formally invited to. The Iron Claw PAC, Julian Vane, the Hollows. Nobody sent to the Hollows came back the same. Most didn't come back at all. You knew, she said. Not a question. She was just saying it out loud, turning it over, feeling the shape of it. You've known for a while. That's why you stopped fighting the debt calls. Well, you'd already decided. Silas didn't answer. That was its own kind of answer. The scarred courier moved, slightly, near the doorway. A small adjustment of his weight. Patience wearing its thinnest coat. You have an hour to pack, Elena said. Take what you can carry. Kira stood in her parents' study. In the house she'd spent her whole life trying to hold together, with flour-covered hands and cracked radiators, and silence. And she understood. Finally. Completely. The way you understand something only when there is nothing left to soften it. They had never been protecting her. She had been protecting them. And now, she had no more value in that equation. So they'd found another one. She turned, walked to the door. Didn't look back at the scroll. Didn't look back at her mother's rings or her father's careful, procedural eyes. She had 1 hour. She intended to use every second of it to stop crying before the courier saw her face. They drove for 4 hours without telling her where they were going. Not that she asked. Asking felt like it would cost her something she couldn't afford to spend yet. Some last fragment of dignity that was still, technically, hers. So she sat in the back of the courier's black vehicle, her bag wedged between her feet, and watched the landscape change through a window that had been tinted so dark it turned the world outside into a rumor. She had packed light, not because she was brave, because her hands had been shaking so badly she could only manage what she could grab without thinking. A change of clothes, her grandmother's hairpin, the small journal she kept under the loose floorboard beside her bed. Of things that didn't need to be decided on. Things her hands already knew. She hadn't cried. She'd promised herself that much. She was keeping the promise. Barely. The Iron Claw territory announced itself before the gates did. The trees changed first. Older here, closer together. The kind of old that felt intentional, like something had decided long ago that light wasn't welcome. Then the road narrowed. Then the road stopped pretending to be a road and became something harder, more honest. Packed earth and gravel and the faint dark stain of things she didn't let herself identify. Then the gate. Iron. Obviously. The kind of iron that had been worked by someone who wanted you to understand, before you ever passed through it, that nothing on the other side was going to be gentle. The claw emblem was forged directly into the metal at the center. 3 curving prongs spread wide, tips sharp enough that even at a distance, they looked like they could draw blood. They probably had. The courier spoke briefly into a handheld radio. The gate opened without ceremony. And that, somehow, was the worst part. That it opened so easily, so automatically, the way a mouth opens around something it's swallowed before. The woman waiting for her inside the gate was called Marin. She had the kind of face that had been beautiful once and had since made a different decision. Sharp jaw, close-cropped hair, eyes that moved across Kira the way a merchant's eyes move across inventory, measuring, calculating, noting deficiencies. Bag, she said. Kira held it tighter, which she knew was pointless, which she did anyway. I won't ask twice. She handed over the bag. Marin went through it with quick, practiced hands. The clothes, sorted to one side, acceptable. The journal, opened, flipped through, pages scanned without reading. The hairpin, held up briefly to the light, turned once, pocketed. That was my grandmother's, Kira said. Was, Marin agreed, and moved on. That single word. Was. Said without cruelty, without emphasis, without anything at all, which was somehow more devastating than if she'd said it to wound. Marin wasn't being cruel. She was being accurate. Everything Kira had owned 2 minutes ago was past tense now, and the woman doing the sorting hadn't even needed to raise her voice to explain it. They walked her through a courtyard that smelled of smoke and iron, and something underneath both that she eventually identified as fear. The specific, layered scent of it that builds up in places where it's been present long enough to sink into stone. She kept her eyes forward, kept her breathing even, kept doing the small, private arithmetic of survival. I am standing. I am walking. I have not fallen yet. The branding room was at the end of a corridor that got colder the further in you went. Nobody called it the branding room out loud. There was no sign. But she knew what it was the moment the door opened. The particular smell of it, metallic and scorched, and layered with something antiseptic, the way hospitals smell like medicine over blood. There was a chair bolted to the floor, a brazier in the corner, heating an iron tool whose head she could see glowing faint orange from across the room. "Left wrist," said the man standing beside the brazier. She thought about refusing. She understood, in the same breath, what refusing would cost her here, in this room, with this man, in this territory, and what it would gain her. Nothing. It would gain her nothing except pain applied differently. So she sat in the chair. She extended her left wrist. She turned her face away, not because she was afraid of the sight, but because she didn't want her expression to be witnessed. That was the one thing they couldn't take yet, the interior of her face. The iron was hot. She did not make a sound. The mark it left was the iron claw emblem, 3 prongs, curved inward, burned into the soft skin on the inside of her wrist, just below her pulse point. "It's a practical placement," she registered distantly, through the white noise of pain. Somewhere visible, somewhere that reminded you, every time you moved your hand, what you were now. Property. Pack-bound. Not yours. Marin handed her a gray tunic after. Rough weave, no seams at the collar, the kind of garment designed to be functional and nothing else. No mirrors in the room. She put it on. "You'll go to the Hollows at first light," Marin said, already moving toward the door. "Sleep while you can." She said it almost kindly. The way you say, "eat before the storm," not out of care, but out of the particular mercy of someone who knows what's coming and still isn't going to tell you. Kira sat in the gray tunic in the cold room, her wrist still burning, her grandmother's hairpin already gone, and she thought about the legends Barnaby would later tell her. She didn't know his name yet, didn't know the stories yet. She only knew that something in her blood, something deep and wordless and old, had started, very quietly, to wake up. The Hollows were exactly what the name promised. Not a camp, not a facility. A hollow. Something scooped out of the earth and filled with people the world had decided it no longer needed to be careful with. The entrance was a descending ramp cut into the hillside, wide enough for the supply carts that came twice a week, and narrow enough to remind you, every time you walked it, that leaving was not the primary design consideration. She went down at first light, the way Marin told her to. She didn't come back up for 11 days. The work was obsidian sorting. That was the clean way to say it. The actual way to say it was this. Somewhere deep in Iron Claw territory, the earth produced veins of black volcanic glass, and Julian Vane had decided that the most efficient way to process it was human hands. Because human hands could feel the difference between a shard worth selling and a shard worth discarding in ways that machines, apparently, still couldn't. So they sorted. Hours that had no name, in light that came from suspended lanterns hung at intervals, just far enough apart to guarantee you were always working in the space between illuminated and not. Your fingers learned the obsidian, learned its weight, its temperature, the particular whisper it made when the edge was clean. They also learned what it felt like when the edge wasn't clean. The cuts were shallow mostly. You stopped noticing them after the 3rd day, or you stopped counting them after the 5th. Kira noticed everything on the 1st day. By the 4th, she had learned the first rule of the Hollows. Noticing too much was its own kind of injury. You had to narrow your world down to the shard in your hand, the bin in front of you, the breath in your chest. Everything else was noise that would eat you if you fed it. She was learning not to feed it. Barnaby found her on the 6th day, which was apparently how long he gave new arrivals, before deciding whether they were worth talking to. He was old in the way that certain things are old, not fragile, but dense, compressed by time into something harder than it started as. His hands were a map of every cut the obsidian had ever given him, a scar tissue laid over scar tissue until his palms looked like a cracked riverbed. He walked with a slight list to the left, a very old injury that he'd made his own, and he wore his gray tunic with the particular ease of a man who had long since stopped being defined by what he was wearing. He sat down beside her sorting bin without asking. She didn't tell him not to. "You hold it wrong," he said, nodding at the shard in her hand. "I'm still bleeding less than yesterday." "That's a low bar." "It's the only bar I have right now." He made a sound that might have been a laugh, short, dry, the kind that had forgotten it was supposed to be warm but hadn't given up entirely. He took a shard from the pile, held it up between two fingers. At a slight angle she hadn't tried, rotated it once toward the lantern light, and set it clean in the correct bin. No hesitation. No cut. "Angle," he said. "Always toward the light. The good ones catch it differently." She tried it. The shard sorted cleanly. She tried the next one. Clean again. She didn't say thank you, because something told her he wasn't the kind of man who collected thanks. She just kept sorting, the new way, and he kept sitting. And after a while, the silence between them stopped being strange and started being something else. The kind of quiet that happens between people who have both decided, without discussing it, that they are not a threat to each other. That was how it started. But he talked while they worked, not constantly. Barnaby understood that words, like obsidian shards, had weight, and you didn't spend them carelessly. But he talked. Stories? Oh, mostly. The kind that old wolves carry the way other people carry photographs, worn soft at the edges from handling, but the image at the center still sharp. He told her about the Alpha King on the 8th day, not as myth, not as bedtime story comfort. He said it the way you say something you saw with your own eyes and know the listener isn't going to believe. But you've stopped caring about being believed because the truth doesn't require an audience to remain true. Jordan King, he said. The name landed in the dim air of the hollows with a weight that felt disproportionate to 2 words. I saw him once, 15 years ago, at the Border Summit, before any of this. He gestured vaguely at the walls, the lanterns, the gray tunics, at everything the hollows was. What was he like? Kira asked. She hadn't meant to ask. The question came out of her the way things come out of you when you've spent 8 days being very careful and your guard slips for just 1 second. Barnaby looked at her sideways. Like the ground right before an earthquake, he said. Everything still. Everything too still. And then, he clicked his fingers once, quietly. She felt it in her wrist, the branded wrist, a flicker of something beneath the burn that had nothing to do with the mark and everything to do with that name, spoken in this dark, in this place, by this man who said it like he meant it. They say he's looking for someone, Barnaby said, returning to his sorting, voice dropping to the register people use when they're deciding, mid-sentence, how much to say. A mate, someone whose blood the bond has already chosen. He paused, set a shard down. They say when he finds her, nothing will be able to hold him back from her. Not walls, not pacts, not contracts. He didn't look at her when he said the last word. She didn't look at him either. But her hands had gone very still over the obsidian pile, and the lantern above them threw her shadow long across the sorting floor. And for the first time in 8 days, in longer than that, if she was being honest, something in her chest shifted. Microscopic, tectonic. The way continents move, imperceptibly, and then all at once. She picked up the next shard, angled it toward the light, set it down clean. The summons came on a Tuesday, which meant nothing, except that it was the day Kira had finally stopped flinching every time a door opened. 3 weeks in the Hollows had done that to her. Ground the flinching down, and ground a lot of things down. The softness in her palms, the last remnants of a sleep schedule, the particular kind of hope that needed good conditions to survive. What was left was something leaner, quieter, a version of herself she didn't fully recognize yet, but was beginning to understand she might need. The guard who came for her didn't explain. They never explained. He simply said, "Vane wants you cleaned up," and handed her a folded set of clothes through the dormitory bars like you'd hand a dog a new collar. She looked at what was inside. A uniform. White. Stiff-collared, with a black sash at the waist and small iron buttons running from throat to hip. The kind of thing designed to make a person look like furniture. Functional. Replaceable. Present without being visible. She understood immediately what it was for, but even before anyone told her, Julian Vane was having a party. They did her hair with efficiency and no warmth, a woman she'd never seen before, working quickly with pins and water and something that smelled faintly of roses, pulling Kira's silver blonde hair back into a tight, severe arrangement that left her neck exposed and her face very open and very readable. Exactly as intended. A silent maid wasn't supposed to have anywhere to hide her expressions. The humiliation was the point. She was to be seen struggling with it. That was the performance Vane wanted. She kept her face neutral while the pins went in. She'd been practicing that too. The mansion's main hall had been transformed. She felt it before she saw it. The warmth of hundreds of candles pushing against the stone corridor. The sound of an orchestra tuning somewhere above. The smell of wax and expensive food, and the particular tension of people performing wealth for each other. She was handed a silver tray at the entrance to the hall. Crystal glasses, pale gold liquid already poured. "You don't speak," the head attendant told her. Older man, iron claw brand on his wrist. He said it without apology, which was its own form of apology. "You don't make eye contact unless addressed, and you will not be addressed. You move, you serve, you disappear. If a glass empties, you refill it. If someone drops something, you retrieve it. If you spill..." He paused, something shifting briefly in his expression. "Don't spill." She nodded once. He looked at her for just a moment longer than he needed to. Then he turned away. The guests arrived in masks. That was the masquerade of it, the theater. And she moved through them like water moves through rock, always finding the smallest available path. The masks made it easier, in a way. Harder to be seen by people whose eyes were already performing. She watched them over the rims of her tray. The Iron Claw lieutenants in their deep red. The visiting alphas with their careful postures. The women in gowns that cost more than her parents' debt, and wore that knowledge comfortably. She watched Vane. He stood at the far end of the hall, unmasked, because of course he was unmasked. It was his house, his party, his theater, in a black suit that fit him the way expensive things fit powerful men. He was handsome in the way that made you distrust handsome. Sharp features. A smile that arrived before his eyes did. He held his glass without drinking from it, which was the tell she'd noticed. Vane didn't drink at his own gatherings. He watched. He catalogued. He was the only sober person in the room, and he knew exactly what advantage that was. He found her twice in the first hour, not obviously. Just a glance, held a beat too long, dropped before she could respond to it. A check. Still there. Still contained. Still mine. She carried her tray to the opposite end of the hall both times, and did not look back, because looking back was a language she refused to speak to him. Her wrist ached. It always ached in warmth. Something about the heat, the skin still remembering. She was refilling a glass near the eastern archway when the room changed. She felt it before she identified it. The orchestra didn't stop, or the conversations didn't pause. Nothing visually shifted, but something in the room's atmosphere moved, the way air moves before a storm when there's no cloud yet in the sky. A pressure drop, a held breath, something primal in the assembled wolves responding to a presence that had just entered. Her tray tilted. She caught it. A glass rocked, steadied, didn't fall. She looked up. The man who had entered was standing just inside the main doors, still half in shadow, a dark mask covering the upper half of his face. He was tall, not in the way Vane was tall, broad and constructed, but in the way of something that had simply grown to its full height without anyone stopping it. A gray jacket, no adornment, no entourage pressing forward around him. The people nearest the door had simply moved, not from instruction, from instinct. He wasn't looking at Vane. He wasn't looking at the room. He was standing very still, his head slightly tilted, the way an animal goes still when it catches a scent it hasn't encountered before. The kind of stillness that isn't absence, the kind that is total, focused, searching attention. Kira looked away first. Her heart was doing something she didn't have a name for yet. She moved deeper into the crowd, tray level, face neutral, and told herself it meant nothing. She had learned, these past 3 weeks, not to trust things that felt significant. She had been wrong about significant before. He moved through the room the way weather moves, not asking permission, not announcing itself, simply arriving and rearranging everything in its path. Kira kept her tray level and her eyes down and told herself she wasn't tracking him. She was tracking him. It wasn't a choice, exactly. More like the way your eyes find a candle in a dark room. Not because you decided to look, but because something older than decision made the calculation for you. She was aware of him the way she was aware of her own pulse. Constant, peripheral, impossible to ignore once noticed. He hadn't taken a drink, hadn't stopped to greet anyone, though several people had tried. She'd watched 2 lieutenants approach and fall back after a single exchanged word, their body language recalibrating the way bodies do when they've miscalculated rank. He moved with the particular unhurriedness of someone who had nowhere to be because everywhere was already waiting for him. Vane had seen him. She caught that too. The way Vane's posture shifted, almost imperceptible, and the kind of adjustment a man makes when he wants very much to appear as though he hasn't adjusted at all. His glass came up. He smiled at something a nearby woman said. His eyes didn't leave the far end of the room. Kira filed this away. She moved toward the eastern corridor to retrieve a fresh tray, keeping close to the wall, the route she'd mapped in the first hour, because it kept her farthest from Vane's sightlines. The orchestra was playing something slow and ornate, the kind of music that filled a room so completely there was no space left for silence. And yet somehow, the silence found her anyway. A small pocket of it, just ahead, where the guests had thinned. She stepped into it and stopped. He was standing 4 feet away, not looking at her. Facing the tall window at the corridor's end, his back mostly to the room, one hand resting loose at his side, still wearing the dark mask, the gray jacket, no glass. He was looking at the black glass of the window, at the reflection of the party behind him, with an expression she couldn't read from this angle and wasn't sure she was meant to. She should have turned back. Every logical thing in her said turn back, reroute, return to the crowd where she was furniture, and furniture didn't get noticed. She took 1 step forward, then another. Because the tray needed refilling, and the corridor was the only route to the kitchen, and she was not going to reroute her whole evening, because a man she didn't know was standing near a window. That was what she told herself. She was almost past him when he spoke. "You've been avoiding the left side of the room all evening." His voice was low, not loud enough for the party, but precisely calibrated for the distance between them, which was somehow more unsettling than if he'd spoken at volume. Kira stopped walking, kept her tray level, kept her face composed. "I move where the glasses need refilling," she said. Quiet. Careful. The words of a shadow maid, neutral, functional, designed to deflect. A beat of silence. "That's not why." She turned to look at him then, because not turning would have been its own kind of answer. He was facing her now. She hadn't heard him move, which meant he'd turned when she stopped, which meant he'd been waiting for her to stop. Up close, the mask covered his brow and the bridge of his nose, leaving the lower half of his face visible, jaw, mouth, the particular stillness of a person who has learned to think before every expression. His eyes, behind the mask, were darker than the room had any right to produce. They were looking at her with an attention that had nothing to do with the party, nothing to do with the silver tray in her hands, nothing to do with anything she had a category for. Her wrist ached. And then, impossibly, without explanation, without precedent in anything she had ever felt, it stopped. The ache that had lived in her branded skin for 3 solid weeks, the low, constant throb she'd accepted the way you accept weather, the one she'd stopped expecting to be without. It was simply gone. Between one breath and the next. Like something nearby had drawn the heat out of it and replaced it with something else entirely. She looked down at her wrist. Reflex. She couldn't help it. When she looked back up, he was still watching her. And something in his expression had shifted. The stillness had deepened, if that was possible. Become more specific. The way a person looks when they've just confirmed something they were almost afraid to hope was true. "What's your name?" he asked. She shouldn't give it. Names were the last thing that still belonged entirely to her. The hollows had taken her clothes, her bracelet, her sleep, her skin. Nobody here had her name yet. She'd been the new one for 3 weeks, and she had let that stand, because letting it stand meant keeping something. The music from the main hall swelled. Somewhere behind her, glass clinked against glass, and laughter moved through the room in the shape of a wave. She stood in the quiet pocket beside the window and felt something she hadn't felt since the night in her parents' study. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. Something underneath hope, the ground that hope grows from, if you're patient enough and hard enough and haven't had it taken from you more times than it can survive. "Kira," she said. He said nothing for a moment. Then, very quietly, with a weight that she wouldn't understand until later, "I've been looking for you." She didn't know what to do with that. So she did the only thing left. She dipped her head, the shadow maid's non-response, and walked to the kitchen with her empty tray and her suddenly painless wrist and the specific feeling of a life about to crack open at the seam. She made it 12 minutes. That was how long the kitchen gave her. 12 minutes of cold stone walls and the smell of roasting meat and the distant, manageable sound of the party filtered through 2 closed doors. 12 minutes to set down the tray, to press her back against the wall beside the flower bins, to breathe in the specific way she'd been practicing since the hollows, the slow count, the deliberate expansion, the trick of making your body believe it was calm until your mind had no choice but to follow. She picked up the fresh tray, walked back out. She didn't look for him. She lasted 4 minutes before Vane found her. He didn't touch her. He was too precise for that in public, too aware of the performance. But he materialized at her shoulder, the way he always did, close enough that she could smell the scotch he pretended not to drink, close enough that the message was structural rather than spoken. I see where you've been. I see who you stood near. I am the only authority in this room. You're assigned to the main floor, he said, but conversational, almost pleasant. Not the corridor. I was retrieving a fresh tray. The kitchen staff retrieves trays. He let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. You retrieve nothing without instruction. You go nowhere without instruction. His voice dropped a register, just slightly, just enough that it became something else underneath the party noise. Am I understood? She looked at the middle distance and said, yes. He stayed one breath longer than necessary. Then he moved away. She stood with her tray and her composed face, and felt, somewhere beneath the composure, the specific exhaustion of a person who has been performing, not afraid for so long that they've lost track of where the performance ends. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was older than fear. It was the bone-deep weariness of existing in a space where every molecule of air belonged to someone else, and you were only permitted to breathe it conditionally. Her wrist didn't ache. That was still true. She kept noticing it the way you notice a missing tooth with your tongue, the absence more present than the presence had been. She was near the center of the main floor when the temperature dropped, not metaphorically, literally. A drop in the room's warmth, as though something had opened that let the outside in, except no doors had opened. The candles nearest the entrance guttered without wind. She watched 3 of them gutter in sequence, left to right, like a wave moving through the room ahead of something she couldn't yet see. The orchestra stopped, not at the end of a piece, mid-phrase. The violins simply ceased, one by one, in a ragged descending silence that was somehow louder than the music had been. The room turned. Jordan King had removed his mask. She couldn't see his full face from where she stood. Too many people between them, the crowd thickening as it pulled back, the way a tide pulls back before the wave arrives. But she could see the effect of his face on the people nearest him, the way they stepped back, not from threat, but from recognition. The way the Iron Claw lieutenants near the door exchanged a look that was not a plan, but a prayer. Vane had gone very still at the far end of the room. Jordan spoke, and the room was quiet enough now that it carried cleanly to every corner. "I'm going to ask once," he said. "Where is she?" Not a question. The grammar of absolute certainty. The sentence structure of a man who already knew the answer and was extending one final courtesy before he stopped extending courtesies. Vane smiled. The cut-glass smile, the one that arrived before his eyes did. "You'll need to be specific," Vane said. "There are many women here." "There is one woman here." Jordan moved through the crowd, and the crowd moved with him, not retreating exactly, just reorganizing itself around his path, the way water reorganizes around a stone. "And she is wearing your brand on her wrist, which means you've committed an act of war against the royal crown, which means this party ended approximately 30 seconds ago." Kira's tray was in her hands. She couldn't remember deciding to lower it. His eyes found her. Across the whole width of that candlelit room, through the masks and the gowns and the frozen expressions of 100 witnesses, his eyes found her, the way her grandmother's bracelet had always found her wrist in the dark, without searching, without error, as though there had never been any other possible destination. He crossed to her. Up close and unmasked, he was different than she'd assembled him from glimpses. Not harder, but more specific. The lines of his face carried the particular gravity of someone who had made decisions that could not be undone and had learned to live in the country of their consequences. He looked at her, the way the corridor window had looked at the party, reflecting, containing, taking in everything without revealing what it would do with what it saw. He lifted her left wrist. She let him. She didn't know why she let him. except that her body had already decided before she was consulted. He looked at the brand for a long time. Something moved through his expression. She watched it move, watched it arrive and pass, a weather system in fast forward. And when it was done, what remained was not anger. Anger was too small. It was the specific, absolute, clarifying cold of a man who has located the precise nature of the wrong that has been done, cataloged it completely, and is now simply deciding the order in which to address it. He turned. Julian Vane. Vane had not moved from his position. He was still holding the glass he didn't drink from, still wearing the pleasant expression. But his knuckles, Kira noticed, were white around the crystal stem. "This is an overreaction," Vane said. "The enslavement of a royal mate carries one sentence under crown law." Jordan's voice hadn't risen. It didn't need to. "You knew that when you signed the contract. I wasn't informed of her lineage. The mate bond doesn't require your information." Jordan took one step forward. "It required mine." The glass dropped from Vane's hand. She didn't see exactly what happened next. Later, she would understand. It was a mercy that she didn't, that some things are not meant to be carried in the body as images. She heard it. She felt the room flinch, collectively, all at once, 100 people breathing in and not out. She looked at the floor, at her flower-free, tray-empty hands, at her wrapped wrist. When the room breathed again, it breathed differently. A large hand settled on her shoulder. Steady. Warm. "You're safe," Jordan said. Close. On just for her. The voice calibrated again, the way it had been in the corridor. Precisely the distance between them, no further. "I have you." She looked up at him. She thought about her grandmother's bracelet at the bottom of an iron claw box, about flour on her hands in a kitchen that would never be hers again. About 4 seconds, she counted into a concrete wall while a mark was pressed into her skin. About 12 minutes in a cold kitchen, telling herself to breathe. Her eyes filled. She didn't stop them. She was so tired of stopping them. She woke up warm for the first time in 3 weeks and didn't trust it. That was the first thing. Before she opened her eyes, and before she cataloged the softness beneath her, or the weight of the blanket, or the quality of the light pressing against her closed lids, she felt the warmth, and her body tightened around it like a fist, the way it had learned to tighten around anything good, because good things in the last 3 weeks had been specifically designed to be taken away. She opened her eyes. The ceiling was stone, but not the hollow stone, not that low, gray, waterlogged concrete that sweated through summer and cracked through cold. This stone was old and deliberate, carved in long, vaulted arches that pulled the eye upward and then held it there. Morning light moved through a tall window to her left, in a column so clean and golden it looked structural, like a wall built from something better than light. She was in a bed, an actual bed, not a cot, on not a pallet. Linen. The kind of linen that had been washed so many times it had stopped being stiff and become something else entirely. Something that held warmth the way old things hold everything, without effort, without thinking about it. Her wrist was unwrapped. She looked at it carefully, the way you look at damage you've been tending in the dark and are finally seeing in full light. The brand was still there. It would always be there. She understood that. Some marks are not asked permission, but the skin around it had changed. The angry red perimeter, the heat that had radiated from it through 3 weeks of Hollow's work and cold water and insufficient sleep, was gone. The mark itself looked older than it was. Settled. Like scar tissue that had taken years to calm instead of a single night. She pressed her thumb against it. No pain. The inflammation responds to proximity, Jordan said. She turned. He was sitting in a chair near the window, not quite in the column of light, but close enough that it caught the edge of him, the line of his jaw, one hand resting open on his knee. He was dressed plainly. No jacket, no formal weight. He looked like a man who had been sitting in that chair for some time and had not slept, which meant he had been there when she was sleeping, which should have unsettled her, and somehow didn't. Proximity, she repeated. To me. To the mate bond. He said it plainly, the way you say things that are enormous when you've had longer to sit with their enormity than the other person has. It's not fully activated yet. When it is, the mark will fade entirely. She looked at her wrist, then at him. You're going to need to explain that from the beginning, she said. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. The shape a smile leaves behind after it's passed through. I know, he told her without rushing. That was the thing she noticed first. He didn't compress it, didn't summarize it the way people summarize things they're impatient to be done explaining. He told her about the royal lineage, about bloodlines that ran deeper than pack records, about wolves born into suppressed lines when the families above them wanted no competition for power. He told her that her parents, had known, not guessed. Known, had identified the dormancy in her genes when she was young enough that suppressing it required nothing more than environment, isolation, the careful withdrawal of anything that might have triggered her nature into waking. She thought about the flinching. 3 weeks to stop flinching every time a door opened. She thought about a lifetime of being told she contributed nothing. She thought about her mother's rings and her father's procedural eyes, and the word purpose used in place of labor, and she understood, with a clarity that felt less like revelation and more like finally reading a document she'd been holding upside down her entire life, that the suppression hadn't started with the Iron Claw contract. It started the day they realized what she was. They sold me, she said, because I was becoming something they couldn't control. Jordan looked at her steadily. Yes. She breathed through that. In. Out. Slow and deliberate and entirely her own. So you said your blood unlocked something. At the masquerade, when I held your wrist, he paused. The mate bond carries a transfer of recognition, not just emotional. Genetic. My royal alpha genes recognized yours and began the process of waking what was suppressed. He looked at her wrist. That's why the pain stopped. Your body stopped fighting itself. She was quiet for a moment. Outside the tall window, somewhere in the distance, she could hear birds. Normal birds, doing normal bird things, entirely unaware that the floor of her life was being replaced beneath her feet while she sat in borrowed linen and tried to keep up. What does it feel like? She asked. When it finishes waking. He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, which she was already learning was simply how he handled questions. All of them, large and procedural alike. Like remembering something you never forgot, he said. Like a word that was always in your mouth. You just couldn't hear yourself saying it. She looked down at her unwrapped wrist, at the mark that had taken something from her, and was now, apparently, sitting in a body that was rearranging itself into something those people in that study never intended her to become. She thought about the crack in the hollow's wall, water and time and pressure, working quietly until the concrete finally gave. She thought about flour on her hands and a grandmother's bracelet, and 4 seconds she counted into a wall. She thought about her mother's smile. I want to go back, she said. Quiet. Level. Not angry yet. Anger was coming. She could feel it gathering the way weather gathers. But right now this was something colder and more precise. Not yet. But I want to go back. Jordan looked at her for a long moment. I know that too, he said. And the column of morning light between them held steady, and the birds outside continued their ordinary business, and somewhere inside her chest, something old and suppressed and entirely her own turned. was no longer hers. East corridor. Second door. Kira stood. You'll know where it is. You've walked past it enough times. She gave them until Sunday. Not out of generosity. She examined her motives carefully, because she didn't want to mistake procedure for mercy or mercy for weakness. And she found, honestly, that it was neither. It was simply the correct amount of time to move personal belongings to 2 rooms and absorb the new shape of a life. She'd had 4 seconds in a concrete building and 1 hour in her childhood bedroom. She was giving them 4 days, and that was not mercy. That was mathematics. On Monday morning, she stood in the entrance hall of what had been her parents' house and watched the first crew arrive. 12 wolves from the border settlements, young mostly, are carrying the particular quietness of people who had learned not to expect much and were not yet sure if this was the kind of thing it was safe to expect. She showed them the East Wing herself, walked them through the rooms she'd grown up moving through, like a ghost, permitted to haunt, but not to inhabit. The room where her mother had kept the good china. The room where her father had held meetings she wasn't invited to. The long corridor with the runner carpet worn down the center. She told them these rooms were theirs now. She watched their faces when she said it, the way the information arrived, slowly, with the particular caution of people who'd been told good things that then reversed. She recognized that caution. She intended to honor it. She saw her parents at noon. Her mother was on her knees in the main hallway with a scrub brush, working at the grout between the flagstones with the focused attention of someone who had decided that concentration was the only available dignity. Her silk robe was gone, a plain work dress, gray, slightly too large at the shoulders. Her rings were still on. Kira had not taken the rings, had not been able to make herself take the rings, which told her something about herself she filed away without judgment. Her father was washing windows in the East Corridor, methodically. The same corridor she'd used to root herself around vain sightlines, she thought, and then stopped thinking it because the comparison made something hurt in a way she wasn't ready to examine. He saw her before she spoke. He stopped, cloth in hand, window half clear, the grounds visible through the clean half and obscured through the dirty half, which was its own kind of metaphor, and she was too tired to decide if she'd arranged it intentionally. She had not arranged it intentionally. Some things arranged themselves. The kitchen crew needs direction on the East Wing layout, she said. Practical. Clean. Mrs. Alder will brief you both at 2. Silas looked at her for a long moment. His face was doing the thing she'd finally named last week. That expression from the night of the contract. The storyteller standing outside his own story, seeing its shape for the first time. Kira. Her name again. Quieter this time. 2 o'clock, she said. Mrs. Alder. She walked away. Not because she had nothing to hear. Because some things, once said too late, needed more time than she currently had to decide what to do with them. She was 22 years old, and she had a sanctuary to build, and a coronation in 6 days, and she was allowed to decide what she was ready for. She was learning, slowly, that deciding what you were ready for was its own form of power. Maybe the oldest form. The coronation was held on a Thursday, which meant nothing except that it was raining lightly, the way it sometimes rains in late autumn. Not storm, not drama, just the sky doing its ordinary work. Jordan stood beside her, not in front of her, not behind her. Beside. The way he had stood at her parents' doorway. Present, not overriding. The crown was lighter than she'd imagined. She didn't know why she'd imagined it heavy. Perhaps because everything had been heavy for so long that she'd stopped imagining things could weigh less than their significance. When it settled, she stood very still for a moment and looked out at the assembled packs. The faces she would spend years learning. The politics she would spend years navigating. The world she had been born to occupy and systematically prevented from entering. And she felt something she hadn't felt since before the contract, before the courier, before the 4 seconds, and the gray tunic, and the dead weight of a tray in a candlelit room. She felt her own size, not pride exactly, not triumph. Something quieter and more structural. The feeling of a thing that has been bent for a long time, finally allowed to be straight. Of a crack running floor to ceiling in concrete that has finally given. Oh, of a bracelet that has always known the shape of the wrist it belongs to. She thought about bread, flour on her hands, an ordinary morning that was supposed to come gray, and ordinary and hers. It had come in the end, just wearing a different shape than she expected, just wearing a crown. If Kira's story moved something in you, if you've ever been the one who held everything together while others counted what you were worth, drop a comment below and tell me. I read every single one. And if you're new here, this is what we do on this channel. We tell the stories of women who were underestimated, traded, and left behind. And we stay until the moment they take everything back. Subscribe if that's the kind of story you want more of. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because I promise you, what's coming next is worth staying for. My name is Andrew, and I'll see you in the next one.